Hello, everybody. Now we have the fantastic option to welcome you in our show together with our guest, Mark Thiele. And I'm grateful that at least the internet connection in the moment is working. And I'm grateful again that everybody is so far in a good mood. And I leave the floor to Mark to introduce himself and tell us a bit about his career, what he did before, and what is the cool and fascinating thing about Web 3.0. Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Ralph. I appreciate that. I'm Mark Thiele, CEO and co-founder for Edgevana. I've been building and deploying and managing infrastructure for over 30 years now. And I've spent time on both the customer side of the equation as the building for an enterprise, and I've spent a little bit of time on the sell side of the equation, where I'm creating products or services that other people are consuming as external customers. I've really had the blessing of being able to work on most anything and everything that would be considered infrastructure, from building entire data centers at hyperscale size to small closets, to building global networks, virtualized infrastructure. All the way back in 2002, we introduced virtualized infrastructure in a pharmaceutical environment during my time at Gilead, as an example. I've spent a lot of time making friends and enemies in the cloud space for the last 14 years. I was very early into that environment, part of the early arguments about what isn't cloud. Luckily, most of those arguments have passed now. And for the last few years, last 5 or 6 years, I've been very, very involved with the development of Edge, all the strategy, all of the deployment models, use case models, but maybe core to this conversation, edge computing, and now even diving deeper into infrastructure associated with Web3, is that what drew me to Web3 and edge computing was the need, but also key is the opportunity to differentiate for the customer. Maybe that's a great talking point for the conversation that we're having today.
Sounds great.
Plenty for us to go over then. Where shall we start?
Well, let's probably start with the foundation of it. What the heck is Web3 as compared to Web2 and Web1, and what's the metaverse
exactly
you want to drive with your infrastructure?
So the interesting thing about Web3 is that people there are people that span the spectrum, but there are a lot of people on both ends of the spectrum. There are people that think of Web3 as solving all of the world's problems, and those people are a mix of it is, right? And there are people that believe its only value is in what do you call it? Cryptocurrencies, right? That's what some people still think. And the spectrum is really somewhere in the middle. And to me, the importance of where Web3 fits, and then the importance of it is that it fits in the sense that Web3 provides us a much better ability to decentralize some of the controls that have historically become part of how Web2 is delivered, or the internet that we're all familiar with today. And what does that mean? Well, we all pick our enemies, and sometimes what appears to be an enemy to you, Thomas, may appear to be my friend, right? It could be the time of the day, it could be how you've been impacted personally, etc. So I don't want to say that Amazon or Google or Microsoft or Facebook or LinkedIn or any of those companies are somebody's enemy. But the fact is that just those 5 names that I just mentioned own an inordinate percentage of what occurs from a data perspective and from an activity perspective on the internet. On the financial side, there are a small number of Swiss, German, English, American, Singaporean, Chinese companies that own almost every transaction that occurs from a financial standpoint. So if we talk about, and they are the middleman, they are the originators, they are the owners of the data, and being a middleman implies cost and implies time. It implies overhead. From a data perspective, it implies issues with privacy, secrecy, et cetera, and gaining value from someone else's information. And Web3, in its best clothing, is an opportunity to distribute the capabilities of the original internet into the hands of the individual in a more meaningful way, right? And what does that really mean? Well, it might mean something as simple as, I want to buy something from an individual in Nigeria, and I can make a transaction right now with him or her, no overhead, no cost, no delay. I could decide that I want to move some money from one place to another, and I don't have to give somebody 2% of the transaction to move it. Pick your poison. But where I really think that Web3 comes into value over time is actually part and parcel with this conversation, which is around customer success, customer differentiation. And what does customer success mean? Well, if you're the customer success means you find what you want and you buy it effectively without somebody stalking you. If you're an enterprise, customer success is you've built a relationship with a customer and they want to buy your stuff, right? But what happens in between is the problem area. The in between is today, many of the companies that we've mentioned already own that data. You don't own it. You don't get to use it even. Other people own that data. They use that data to target you, to not target you, to rule you into things, to rule you out of things, to evaluate you for special deals, to evaluate you for propaganda. But that information is owned by someone else. Web3, in conjunction with opportunities of moving to the edge, et cetera, the use of blockchain provides the potential for really distributing that capability out to the end user, putting more power back in the hands of the creator, back in the hands of the customer. The creator could be somebody who builds a small product. The creator could be somebody who builds a product in the form of a new piece of music, entertainment, digital collectibles, pick your poison, could be any of those or all of those things. But the bottom line is it has the potential to really create an opportunity for the customer to have more control over his or her sharing of data. And they are in a better position to reap the value from that data than allowing everyone else to do that. And
what is Mark, as a question in between, what is then the difference in convenience or in the leading edge, or what is better in Web 3.0 towards Web 2.0?
Yeah, I mean,
help me to understand.
Yeah, from a convenience standpoint, right? If you're talking about pure transactions as an example, there is a much greater opportunity for a true peering relationship, right? And so, what does peering mean? Well, I mean, in the most basic of layman's terms, peering means I can go to you, Ralph. I can go to Thomas. I can go to Marshall. Marshall can go to Thomas. Marshall can go to Ralph. Marshall can go to me. And we can do that independent of anybody else controlling the conversation.
Okay.
Having to, I mean, what's one of the worst things that we do as customers, that we have to do as customers, almost every single time we want more than the headline on a web page. We have to give all of our private information. They get to know what IP we're coming from. They get to know what country we're in, probably what town we're in, probably what ISP we're on, maybe even where we browsed before we got there, where we browse after we got there. They get to know our email address. They get to know potentially our phone, our home address. All of that information is valuable, and every extra click you make makes that information more valuable. That is unnecessary. If I know Ralph and I want to trade music with him, or if he wants to bring my music to market in the Netherlands, or we want to have a financial transaction. Right now, if somebody wants to remit money back home from, say, the U.S. to Ecuador or the U.S. to the Philippines, they've got to pay 10 cents sometimes on the dollar to make that transaction occur. And other people are collecting all that data for whatever it means. Who has the money? Where'd the money come from? Is that always used? Maybe it's not, but the only time it's not used is when the company isn't smart enough to extract the data from the folks that are using their systems. And Web3 really has a chance. Again, I know it sounds very simplistic, but it has a chance to distribute what was meant to be from the beginning, and that's more of the power to the individual. Right?
Cool. Thanks for explaining.
Yep.
Let me
I
assume
like that you. Oh, go ahead, Thomas. You started.
Let me assume my most favorite role, the devil's advocate.
Sure.
The big distractor or whatever. you just
Grumpy
said
cat is alive.
The middleman is where the bottleneck is where the power lies, basically.
Yep.
So now another understanding of what happens in a transition between Web 2 and Web 3 is that there's just another middleman. Means the operators of those blockchains that control the whole stuff. Apart from them using an inordinate amount of energy, don't they make themselves the new middleman?
Yeah, Thomas. So it's a great question, and I wish I could say we talked ahead of time and I told you to ask this question because it really plays well into what Edgevana is trying to do, but not just Edgevana, right? But when you think about, so for instance, pick a chain, right? Ethereum, Avalanche, Solana, Cardano, Near, Aptos. Pick your poison, any one of them. Their goal over time, and in some cases they're more successful than others are, is to actually distribute where their blockchain works. So you decide whether you want to use the blockchain. They don't collect any information from you when a transaction occurs on the blockchain. The only people that get access to that transaction and the data created during that transaction are the people actually making the transaction. And even the compute that's used to support the blockchain protocol, the actual software technology that allows the blockchain to work, even the compute that supports it, in theory, and that's again part of where Edgevana comes in, is distributed and decentralized. So there isn't a single owner. It's not all installed in Amazon or GCP as an example, right? And there are a lot of reasons why that's important. So decentralization is important to the average protocol for the following reasons and a few more. One is that the more decentralized it is, the less chance that 3 or 4 people could buy up a lot of blocks and censor what happens, right? The more decentralized it is, the better you are at being able to provide the equivalent of an SLA, because no one large segment of the network could go down at one time. For instance, if you had half of your instantiations in one cloud provider, as an example, right? The more participation you have on your network via distribution and decentralization, the faster the transactions can occur and with more transparency. So those are just some of the things that are really important to the average blockchain provider. But I think the most important thing is the blockchain providers make money off people that build applications to run on top of their blockchain, right? They don't necessarily make money off the technology that is the blockchain. It's not like somebody's just paying them to be on the blockchain. They get money from the application providers that use the blockchain. And those application providers are only enabled by the participants. So for instance, many of the extended customers of Edgevana through our participation in the Web3 space are people that are known as node operators or validators or storage providers. And think of this as if you took Amazon and you said, every single person in Amazon, take 2 computers with you and distribute yourself all over the planet, and you're all independent entities. That's really how the ideal of a blockchain being provided is offered. Now, you also mentioned sustainability, and sustainability is an issue, and that is core to the point I made early on about the extremes, right? Many people, when they think about the blockchain environment, they think about somebody building a farm of compute that just spends all day long looking for Bitcoin, right? And if there's no transactions happening on Bitcoin because of that, then what's the return value for the impact on society, for the impact on the environment, et cetera? That's a great question. And there are real valid concerns in some of those areas. But the majority of blockchains aren't supported by mass mining like that. In fact, that's contrary to their very story. Their very story, as I've just described, is about decentralization, right? So you could argue, well, if the blockchains are decentralized, doesn't that mean that, well, you still got a lot of people running computers? Yes, you do. But they're running computers to help you, me, Marshall, Rolf, actually complete a transaction. So whether we did a transaction on the blockchain or we did a transaction on a public cloud or in our private enterprise data center, it causes the same impact. Now, what is true, though, is that many of the blockchain companies, including some of our customers, are coming to us or independently trying to find ways to remove the black eye that this mass mining has created. All of them feel sensitive to that issue, and they're looking for ways to reduce their network's impact on energy use. And so is it a target of opportunity? Absolutely. Are people working on it? They absolutely are. Is it perfect? Not yet. But again, that's a big part of the play that Edgevana is making in the space, not only to help them decentralize, but to help reduce the impact on infrastructure utilization from an environmental standpoint.
There already is a lot of infrastructure in place, that has grown not just to support blockchain, but to support, all of the software as a service, platform as a service, and the massive amount of data that's collected to market to people. Right. Should we manage to succeed with Web 3.0, what's going to be done with that? I can't imagine all of that capacity going to waste.
Yeah.
So will it actually be a savings in terms of impact, or will it just be repurposed?
Yeah, I'm guessing that first of all, the long tail of IT is really long, right?
True.
You all three of you, directly or indirectly, have been involved in the IT community for many years, and how many of us have heard the story? I feel stupid even mentioning it again, but how many of us have heard the story about the fact that the mainframe was supposed to be gone by 1995 or whatever it was? The mainframe is still going strong around the world. It's not about to go away. So while there are amazing opportunities associated with Web3, there are, like any technology solution, like you might have a mainframe today, and you might think, I need to get off this mainframe. Would you just go pick up a Raspberry Pi and say, oh, look, a replacement for my mainframe? No. The opportunity to solve a particular problem in IT is oftentimes defined by your ability to architect a solution that is fitting to that need, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about Web3 and edge computing as examples, many of those workloads are defined by needs of where those, what type of jobs will be running there and where those jobs will be running. And many of those aren't a fit for public cloud, but also don't replace public cloud for the time being. But I think the fact remains for us as a larger industry that regardless of how you look at the numbers, regardless of how you say, well, this automation replaces what a horse used to do or what a truck used to do, whatever. You could argue, and I've done it in the past, you could argue that playing a video game is actually more efficient as impact on the environment. It may not be good as impact on your health, but it's more beneficial on impact on the environment than if the same 100 kids that were playing the video game all drove in their mom's minivan to the park where somebody has to mow the grass, they have to water the grass, they have to They have to fertilize the grass, where people create garbage, where people drive their cars to get there. You know how many hours all those same kids could play on video games and not have as much negative impact on the environment? So we like to point to the fact that there are 600 plus hyperscale data centers, for instance, in cloud. But what we don't talk about is what would the world be doing if there wasn't 600 data centers for hyperscale cloud, right? So there isn't an easy answer, but the fact is that many of us in the industry, not just at Advana, but companies like Microsoft and companies across Europe. I mean, Europe has some of the most leading efforts in helping data centers be more efficient, in trying to find alternative energy usage, and creating new metrics and measures, et cetera. And all of the large technology companies, many of whom the leaders of are friends of mine, not the company themselves, but the people that run the infrastructure. Many of these companies are literally doing everything possible, including spending billions of dollars to move towards a zero carbon footprint. And in fact, it's even part of our offering as Advana that we can offer Web 2 companies that want to participate in Web 3 with applications, DDApps, et cetera, with carbon zero footprint. And we can do similar things for certain workloads for our Web 3 clients as well. So it's a major movement, and it's necessary, but it's sort of like, I'll give you a historical lesson from Mark's own work career. When I put in VMware, it was early on, it was 2002. And at first, everybody loved me. Oh, Mark's doing this. He's saving servers. He's enabled more workloads. He's doing better DR. He's doing faster deployment of new applications. Yeah, all that's great. Guess what happened by the budget of 2006? Maybe 2007. Now, VMware has become an actual noticeable bump, real noticeable bump in the trend line of bumps in IT spend. So it doesn't matter what VMware did for me yesterday as the CFO. What matters is now VMware is expensive. It didn't matter that if we tore down VMware and replaced it with just straight servers, it would be 5 times worse. It only matters that VMware is a bump. And that's when, without trying to justify the IT community and the data center community around the world, I do believe that we need to look logically at the problems we're pointing to and say for what they really are. And is technology a target of opportunity to reduce impact on the environment? Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would like to jump in because I can't hold my temper to further on, such as I had a very rough discussion with somebody who is a big fan of esports. And I said, before you get into gaming and in esports and commercializing esports, look for the health of your children in real sports.
Right.
Give them an opportunity to give them a fair option to do for something for their own health. Then we can discuss about how useful green IT was meant to be and what we have left. I'm not a friend from Larry Ellison. I find him in most cases challenging, but to be very fair, Larry Ellison was the one who said that the mainframe will still have a lot of life and a lot of opportunity and will survive for ages. And he was right on that one. And his virtual computing or his cloud computing approaches were not bad.
Right.
What came, which was not to my liking, is that we have a drive of activities where we should see for the balance, and this is what Christy is jumping in as well, for health of people, for health of environment, and for sustainability, and to put on the other edge, which came to my mind and is driving me a bit crazy. It's probably 5 to 6 years ago when people said we will have a big traffic jam in the web. as we know it, because the web is overcrowded. How will we manage this, aside of the sustainability and aside of health reflections and the traffic jam we create in the web?
Right.
Mark,
Yeah.
please help us.
Yeah, it's well, and to be perfectly honest, I mean, that's exactly what we are trying to do, and I don't want to take inordinate credit for trying to do that, but even from the perspective of, so I've been in this space for a long time, building data centers, looking at efficiency and opportunity since the early 0 years, right, 04, 05 period time frame. And working with organizations like the Green Grid and others to help facilitate that kind of movement. But to argue that the technology companies, even as much as I'm pushing for more sustainability, to argue that the sustainability companies haven't done a good job is actually a bigger lie than that American politics is corruption free. I mean, seriously, it's a bigger lie than American politics being corruption free. And if you look at usage, many of us in the data center community thought that in 2005, 2006, that power utilization would be 5 or 6% of global demand by 2010. Mm-hmm. It's now 2022. Guess where power utilization is? It's still 2%. So when you think about the amount of work and opportunity that is originated from technologies these days, from the future of automated vehicles to supply chain improvements to more improved jet engines to more efficient cars to electric vehicles to whatever. To better automation in manufacturing and retail, et cetera. When you think about all of those potential positive impacts on reduced energy use and waste, to think that all of that improvement has occurred over the last 20 years without a single % increase as a % of the global economy. And that's as far as energy use. So again, not trying to take away from the fact that we need to help reduce that, because we've all done great things at making energy use in a data center better. But that doesn't take into account, where did we make the cement? What kind of paint did we use to paint the steel? Where did we build the steel? How did we extract the steel? How many times do we buy a server and then throw it away? What does that impact? What in other words, what's the embedded carbon in all of that, right? And that's as big a story in real terms, maybe even a bigger story than the direct improvement of going from, a computer that could work with one person in 1999 and support one person's use to that same computer using less power today and support 100 people, right? That's the kind of improvement that we've made in real terms in efficiencies. Imagine if that applied to cars or trains or airplanes or boats, right? You'd be able to fly around the world for $15 in an electric plane.
It's a great point. I think we need to remember, more importantly, we need to consider that it is easy to forget that there is more than one way to save money, more than one way to be efficient. As an example that I was thinking of just the other day, for the longest time, nobody bought, at least here in the US, when an air conditioner in your house started running poorly, you wouldn't have it maintained or fixed. You'd get a new one. Because if you'd had it for more than a couple of years, the new model that you would buy would be so much more efficient in terms of its ability to cool and the amount of electricity it would use, that there would just be no comparison.
Right.
But if you're only focused on the savings of electricity, you're ignoring the very real fact that you're taking this large object that's made out of steel and plastic and rubber with volatile compounds in it, and throwing it on, the trash tip.
And digging again to make the new one. That's exactly right.
And it's the issue that has come up again with electric and hybrid vehicles. Massive fuel savings, but what does it cost to make that car?
Right.
It's a complex world.
Exactly, and most people don't realize and don't want to know that driving your F-150, Americans love their giant vehicles. Driving your F-150 for another year is actually more efficient from a sustainability impact standpoint than buying that brand new Prius. So
another aspect, Mark, is if you jump in that point and you see the let's say decontamination process of a Tesla or another electronic car, when the battery has gone over its life cycle, it's like try to put out the aspect of even that we have war in Europe, in Ukraine, and that some people are using their old Panzers to get them rid of by thrashing them in other people's country. I was quite curious when I learned how complicated and how costly it is to disarm a Panzer or a submarine, or even to take care of the nuclear power plant in that submarine to get it properly dismantled. And where do we use the leftovers? And so I'm a big fan of if we have that air condition, to take Marshall's point, and we are not selling it to another country where it is as good as new, that we dismantle and recombine stuff, instead of digging for the rare earths again. Sorry for interrupting.
Agreed.
Getting a little back to topic. So that there are a bunch of other questions that directly come to mind with Marshall is... Oh, no. I looked into the wrong screen. There are a bunch of questions that are coming to mind when looking at the progress of implementation of any Web3, and in quotes, So there are some promoters, some promoting factors, and some detractors, like in a net promoter score. So what would be the main detractors be?
I think and again, I promise I'm not trying over. I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background playing with his toy.
That's a dog. I was thinking parrot. So you got a squeaky toy, yeah?
I've got a puppy. I apologize. And
no worries.
This is a pet-friendly show.
Good.
And we just wanted to know what type of pet it is. Now we know it. Now we're happy.
That's right. And he's a good puppy, but he is demanding when it comes to attention. And sorry, Thomas, can you you asked the question about Web3 and what the detractors,
promoters and especially detractors as factors. So what would inhibit a transition from Web 2 to Web 3? The basic follow-up question is why would Web 3 achieve what Web 1 and 2 did not achieve?
Well, we talked a little bit about what Web 1 and Web 2 in theory didn't achieve, and that's the peer-to-peer capability of distributed information and purchasing and transactions and independence of data ownership and things like that. And Web 3 is in theory supposed to help solve for that, and I believe that it can. I think from a detractor standpoint, Web 3 is where the internet was in 1995, 1996. And what were the detractors for that back then? The detractors were, could you buy a service that was dependable? Could you buy a service that was that somebody could actually give you an SLA on? Could you buy a service that was easy to consume for the average shopper, someone who didn't know how to code, as an example? Almost literally. I mean, we don't remember, but almost everything you ever did on the internet in any real terms required actual coding skill in the 90s, right? So what is that? How is that a detractor? Well, it's a detractor for adoption. It's a detractor for growth if you raise that barrier to entry. And the barrier to entry for Web3 right now, again, I apologize for mentioning Edgevana so many times, but that's literally what Edgevana is trying to solve for, is reducing the barrier to entry and allowing for people to adopt and use Web3 with the capabilities and user satisfaction that they expect from working with a Salesforce or an HP or an Oracle or something like that. Applications that have SLAs. The ability to use a tool or a platform without having to know, a deep capability of network skills or server skills or coding skills. And so right now, to be perfectly honest, those are some of the biggest areas of detracting from rapid adoption of Web3. And many people are working to try to solve that, but that's a big part of what we're attempting to play right now.
Coming a little back to who pays for it and the middleman. You said something to I summarize it a little, that you and I and Marshall and Ralph with our computing power are helping making this transaction by, validating a transaction on the blockchain using our resources. Means my energy, my CPU capability or capacity. So why should I do that for free? This is in the context of the context.
It's not for free, right? It's not for free because it costs money, but it's also not for free because you actually get paid back for the transactions that you participate in. So similar to, if you think about Amazon, let's say all of us worked at Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, pick your company, doesn't matter. But let's say for discussion's sake, we all work at Amazon. I build servers. Thomas, you build orchestration software. Marshall works in project management, and Rolf looks at data from our server environments. We're all somewhere deep in the bowels of what makes Amazon work as a cloud provider and as a platform for marketing. But each one of us gets paid. We get paid based on the transactions that Amazon completes. Web3 is literally no different, but your participation allows you to get paid in the tokens that are prevalent for that particular blockchain. So when you complete transactions effectively, when you provide a consistent level of service to Filecoin or Solana or Cardano or Near or Ethereum, you get paid in their currency, or in other people who are investing in you, you get paid from their currency as an incentive to do the work that you're doing. And that it does two things. One is it helps to ensure that we are distributed and decentralized, but two, it incents those people to participate and offer a service, whether they're buying that server from Edgevana or they're buying that server from someone else, or they're buying the server themselves and putting it in the data center somewhere on their own. It incents them to participate in that network and to create a more survivable service for the businesses that depend on that network.
Now, continuing on that train of thought. So now a good blockchain, in quotes, has many independent nodes, means there are many service providers in that sense who provide their capacities, their resources to make this transaction. All of them have associated costs with it, and they probably would make some money out of it. Doesn't that mean that a good blockchain just leads to exploding pricing? Means the simple transaction between the person A and person B who transfers some money directly without a bank via means of blockchain, that ultimately this transaction needs to be far more expensive than using a centralized service?
No, I mean there are logical reaching opportunities for us relative to the distributed nature, right? The basic assumption, as a longtime infrastructure person who's been building efficient systems for most of his career, there are efficiencies in putting a lot of stuff in a small place or in one place, right? Similar to a hyperscale data center for a cloud provider. So there is some assumption off the top that anyone could make that there is an impact there. And so you generally speaking, you give up something to get something, right? There's always a yin and yang. What many companies are trying to do, and again, what I've highlighted a couple of times as part of Edgevana, is what Edgevana is trying to do is try to make sure that we do things that make that network as sustainable and successful as a service as possible. And that includes helping to find data center locations that are that provide a higher efficiency rating or have better sustainability targets or are working towards carbon net zero. Or we look at populating part of the network with refurbished equipment that is effectively like 100% recycling of a piece of equipment to use for another 3 years or 4 years on top of its original life. Those are all areas of opportunity. Now, you can do all of those things centralized, but the fact remains that for our future, I think everyone accepts now, I've been arguing it for years, but I think almost everyone accepts now that things like edge computing, the potential future of more metaverse use, potential metaverse being a replacement for our traditional flat interface of websites, et cetera, mean that distributed compute is a requirement. It doesn't matter what we want. It doesn't matter what we like. It's a requirement. So it's not as if Web3 is like, oh, I could use public cloud, but I'll just distribute these nodes all over the place, make them rabidly inefficient because I can. And then I can say I'm decentralized. The fact is that decentralization adds performance to the network. It helps reduce latency. It helps to improve the opportunity for data segregation and data sovereignty, et cetera, all of which are critical and important to the future of edge and to the future of metaverse as well.
So you said the M word.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I'm a believer.
Well, it's in the title as well.
Especially for retail, education, but even for my business. I believe that we have a metaverse website in our future because I believe we can provide the customer with a much better interaction via the metaverse than we can via our flat website. I mean, guys, no one wants to hear this. No one ever wants to hear this. But unless you're actually a retail-focused website, sorry, Riley, my dog's trying to eat a power cord.
Ouch.
Unless you're, unless you're actually a retail website. Very few companies actually get sales because their website is so cool. That's just the truth. We could argue about it all we want, but they don't. They get it from direct sales. They get it from interactions with people, et cetera, et cetera. They get it from online marketing, whatever the case may be. Metaverse has a real opportunity to create individualized experiences that you can do that are roughly equivalent to being there in person, but you can do from your office or you can do from your home. And that creates not only a better relationship with the supplier, with the partner, with the retailer, but it provides a more efficient and more lasting impact with the customer as well, which goes right back to kind of the very point of this show is what's the value to the customer and how can we create customer differentiation that makes a difference to our business. And I really think that a company of any kind of size that doesn't have an effective metaverse environment for their business in 5 or 6 years will be a company that's quickly going under. I think it'll be that.
Yeah. Although that does bring us back to where we started at the top of the hour with definitions.
Yep.
What, in your way of thinking, is metaverse? Because I don't know that we've locked down a definition on that yet, beyond Mark Zuckerberg's branding attempts.
Right.
And I would very much appreciate something more useful than that.
Yeah,
it's a real thing. I'm not criticizing you at all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
I'd like to know where you're going.
Yeah, my I don't have a definition for, either every type of metaverse option that might exist, real or unreal. And because I do believe that there are multiple options, I also don't have a single definition that works for every potential option. That same problem I've been struggling with a larger community on the edge space for years, right? And the same problem still exists there. It takes a while. Cloud took a long time to get people to agree on definitions. My simple take on metaverse in general is that it provides an opportunity for a more experiential engagement with your customer, right? Or with whatever activity you're involved in. And what does that mean? Well, to give you an example, I've worked with a couple of other companies who are building metaverse environments. And think about, you guys have all been to a show, right? Like a technology event, right? And so picture we're walking down the hallway. Let's say Thomas and I are walking down the hallway at this event floor, this virtual event floor. And we see Rolf and Marshall in the distance. Mm-hmm. We know that it's them. We can see it's them, but we don't know what they're talking about. But then we get within 20 feet of them and we start overhearing Rolf is excited about a show that he wants to go see, this next speaker. And then as we get closer, it gets louder. And when we become, really close, they recognize that we're there and they see us and they engage with us. Mm-hmm. And then they say, hey, this next speaker is going to go on in 5 minutes. This really boring guy, Mark Thiele, is going to be speaking. Why don't we go in and heckle him? So the best way to heckle is to get seats together, get the seats up front. So you go in and you collect and you work and you're there. You're creating experiences in an environment. Try to do that on a web page. Try to do that on a phone call. Try to do that on a Zoom call. Right? You're literally creating where you're exchanging things with each other. You're giving each other gifts. You're engaging privately, and then as a group, you're engaging with a larger community, and you're doing it all in the same space. Today, if you participate via a web page at a ball game, as an example, could be a football game, as in soccer, could be a baseball game, as in American baseball, but you can only see the group of people that you're right near at the ballpark. In a metaverse, you literally have the ability to say, oh, I know Rolf is sitting way up in the mezzanine on the other side of the park, and I can walk over and engage with him. Right? I can walk with him from there to a place where they're showing highlights from the game. And so it's really that ability to get that experience that I believe will draw people to the metaverse down the road. I don't think it's going to be obvious right away. I don't think there's going to be a mass exodus over the next year from Web 2 to metaverse environments, but there will be companies that find the right way to leverage metaverse capability to make people go home after the experience saying, wow, that was interesting. That was exciting. I really had a good time with Thomas while we were there, that kind of thing. And that's the tipping point to it becoming a real customer differentiator. And then it's all downhill in a positive way from there.
I think you've just changed the way I think about Web 3.0 and Metaverse in a good way. And I'm not sure I should be giving this away for free, but maybe these are not nouns, but adjectives. Web 3.0 is not a thing. It is a descriptor for how something is done.
That's right.
Is that a fair statement?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's not as if you can go out and say, oh, look, there's a Web 3. Right? That doesn't
or there's the metaverse.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because if you think about metaverses in general, like I have a good friend who runs a company called Vatum, Virtual Atom, Inc., right? And he's working on metaverse environments for large companies. I think most of his focus right now is like on entertainment companies, right? Or multimedia companies. But the one of the problems and the opportunities of the future of the metaverse is that, like Decentraland or whatever it is one of the early ones, right? their point on real estate value is that they're hoping that at some point, the only way to get to the metaverse is if you assume you go to their entry point. And if you go to their entry point, it's like the mall, right? What's the value of a mall? You've encapsulated a lot of options for customers. And once the customers come in, the customer themselves is encapsulated in your environment. And if they don't, it's not as if you're in a mall with 100 stores. You can just say, well, I want to buy from this other store that's not here. You can't do that, right? And so if metaverses end up being 20, 100, 2,000 different destinations that are all independent of each other, contrary to why HTTP and HTTPS were created as an example, that is more of a problem. But if we create an environment where there is interaction and sharing between them, that'll drop land values down. But it'll allow you to virtually say, well, I want to buy a suit from this suit manufacturer, but then I want to go to the movie theater, even though the movie theater might logically be 10,000 miles away. I can get there in, the equivalent of a 2-minute walk.
Didn't you just explain one of the major detractors there for the success of these concepts? Because what actually happens right now, if I'm looking at Decentraland and all the other real estates that are out there, what they do is they translate concepts out of the physical world and proximity matrix out of the physical world into the digital world, where those simply don't apply. Looking at the example you brought earlier, everybody in this football game or soccer game can be in a front row. And everybody can assume every seat at any time,
right?
Without any limitation. And what they are doing is, well, can live anywhere. So the celebrity Ralph and his real estate is not closer to me just because I have the neighboring property, because there is no the distance from one property to the another one is always one.
Yeah.
Always. So, and doesn't that need totally different business models?
Well, I think it does. And so while I'm a huge believer that metaverse in some set of forms will exist and become dominant before the end of the decade, I do have personal struggles with this notion of creating an exclusivity zone, effectively, right? And then making the assumption that because you've got Gucci, because you've got Snoop Dogg, because you've got former President Obama's house, because you've got Marks and Spencer in this one place, that people will be happy just going there. And in reality, that may work for some time to come. But I think the logical future is that you enter the world. You don't enter a location, you enter the world. And how you interact with the world is regulated to some degree the same way it's regulated now, but with some form of credit and cost and personal impact that doesn't involve flying somewhere, doesn't involve paying $2,000 to see the Niagara Falls or a castle in Germany. It doesn't cost that kind of money, but it also is if you go to a game, maybe in the end there will be a cost. Oh, you want front row seats? Well, you have to give up something. You have to donate something back to the community, or you have to buy something, or you have to acquire an NFT for that better seat or something. I don't know, but what I do see happening in the near term are these more kind of exclusivity zones like Decentraland, and then outside of that, specific destination opportunities for large businesses that do a lot of education or do a lot of entertainment, et cetera, where the volume of customers that they have coming into their space and the benefit of interacting in that space will justify you going to a unique address just to gain access to it. That's what I see, at least for the next few years.
So this whole game consists of a bunch of layers, starting from, well, the devices that I use as a consumer, however they will look like in 5 or 10 years.
Right.
It is the software that provides the world, for lack of a better word, sorry. It's the server hardware, be it centralized in an Amazon data center or on the edge, or in the cloud or in the fog, as I like to say sometimes.
Sure.
It's the creator infrastructure, and it's the distribution infrastructure, wireless and wired. So it's the CPUs, the chips. So what type of ecosystem does it need?
Yeah, well, there is a significant amount of technology that's still needed to get it to the point where people might almost forget they're not in real work in the real world anymore. Right? Yeah. There's still a lot of work there, and in some areas it'll take longer than others. So, for instance, if I want to experience something with Rolf at the same time, and Rolf is in the Netherlands and I'm here, and there's equivalent but fairly large scale data requirements for us to share that environment. The ability
just to interrupt, you just do, by the way.
What's that?
You just have a joint experience.
That's true. That's true. But the ability to share like profile information, to share exactly what you're seeing as if it's in real time for both of you is a fairly serious math problem and network overhead problem. And so those are some areas where I think the most amount of work is still to be done. And to give you an example, who here has played a recent video game, like a first-person shooter game or something like that, or even a FIFA game, right?
Marshall, your turn.
Familiar.
No, but you think about, I mean, it's stupid. I used to play Call of Duty all the time, and it used to annoy the crap out of me, even though it's a stupid video game. But what annoyed me was I just blew up that wall with a grenade, and the next time I walk past it, it's not blown up anymore. And none of the other people in the game saw it get blown up. I was the only one that saw it get blown up. And now it's not blown up anymore. And that seems stupid, I agree. But if you want people to interact in an environment where it feels real, then if I throw a stone that skips across the lake, Rolf should see the expanding waves from each of the skip marks. And they should stay on the lake until they are out and gone. And so until we get to that level of interactivity, then we're still missing the opportunity to give people that experience that says, wow, I just literally felt like I visited my cousin Ralph at our country home in the Alps. But that is where it's going. And again, but that's probably where the technology, the coding, the chip manufacturers, the AI capabilities, the coding and network efficiencies all come into play in order to make that happen.
Hopefully, with the decline of crypto coin mining, we'll be able to use all of the freed up GPUs to use that technology for something else.
It couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt. Yeah. I mean, to me, obviously many of our customers are in the Web3 space, but from a market standpoint, we do ourselves a disservice when we think of the technology as a financial unit rather than as an opportunity space. Let the opportunity drive the value of the financial unit, not look, our coin is worth so much money, so this is why you should talk to us, right? And I think that paradigm is changing, and I think it's critical to the success long term of the blockchain and Web3 space.
Yeah. As we are on top of the hour, let's have a look into the glass ball. There is the Web3. I put them, although they are sufficiently different, I put Web3 and Metaverse into one bucket right now. Who will be the major beneficiary? Will it be the end customer? Will it be some specialized company? Or will it be the big platform players that emerged, well, at the beginning of Web 2, basically, and who now have the funding to churn their way through whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that it will be the value will be derived in a more distributed way, and less centralized in its focus. I can't, obviously, I'm not in a position to guarantee that, but that's what I'm hopeful for, and I'm hopeful for that for a number of reasons. Not the least of which is that an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google, if they wanted to have the most servers behind running a blockchain distributed around the world, they could do it tomorrow. They could spend $2 billion and just do it tomorrow if they wanted to. Their one weakness, though, is that they are literally the police officer showing up to the teenage party. They are everything that the people that want to be on blockchain don't want to be. And so they would struggle with adoption. They would probably get some enterprises who would be only looking at the efficiency of putting their enterprise application on it or something. But the fact would remain that if one of those large companies built 20,000 server locations for blockchain validation, et cetera, and distributed them around the world, the one thing that would still be true, the two things that would still be true, is every one of those locations would still be run by that company's software, that company's operations, that company's ethics and profit-making requirements, et cetera. And that is extremely counter to what most participants in the Web3 space are looking to build right now. So that's why I'm hopeful. I don't want to say I'm guaranteeing anything, but I'm hopeful.
Okay.
Hopeful is a good way to be.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Those have also been famous last words, I think.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me, I'll cut that snippet out of the whole episode and publish it separately. If you
Sounds
don't mind.
good.
Okay. So thanks for your time. Many thanks for your time and for your insight. This was
I had a blast.
Enlightening. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And
a
we,
great
by the way, didn't bore everybody to death because there are still people in there.
Yeah. And give our regards to Wiley, please.
I will.
Yep.
Now he's finally gone to sleep. Now that he could make noise, he's finally gone to sleep. So,
That is the usual appropriate way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks to everybody else who attended and who commented. In particular, Christy, who is no more there. But I'm sure we'll see her again in another show.
See you
Going
all next
backstage
week.
now.
Right.
See you, folks.
Thank you.